All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Again, you are here to talk about ways for nonprofits to build local community power. We're talking about engaging candidates. So thrilled that you're here. Nonprofit Vote is thrilled that you're here, and we've got a great program for you today. A couple of just announcements and some housekeeping things. Please make sure that as you have questions that you're putting them in the Q&A section of the webinar. That'll be in that toolbar that is on your screen, and it'll look kind of like this. I'm circling it on my screen here. If you'll put questions there, it's really helpful to keep them all in one place so that we can be sure we're able to answer your question. If you put it in the chat, it's likely to get lost in the conversation, and so we just ask that you put it there, please. And we'll take questions from the audience at the end of the presentation time. Another reminder that the recording of this webinar will be sent out to everyone who registered, not just everyone who attended, but everyone who registered. And then will also be posted on our YouTube channel after this. And also there is closed captioning available. Please message one of us if you have any issues with that, but that is available. The other thing I ask you to do is share lots of encouragement and reactions. If our panelists, if our speakers here are saying something, often community members come and community leaders come to these webinars because we can be among our peers and folks who get it, folks who understand what we're doing, what we're going through, the stresses of being a nonprofit worker, but also the joys. And so please do, as you would react in the room, right? Use that react button as well, so that we can hear that back from you. And also feel free to use the chat as we go. Great. So this is what our time will look like over the next hour. We're doing that agenda review right now. I'll give you a little bit of highlights from Nonprofit Vote, and then I'll introduce these wonderful speakers to you. We'll have a conversation. I've got some prepared questions for them to kind of guide us through these conversations about candidate engagement. Then we'll open those questions up to you all. So please do be adding questions as we go to the Q&A section, and then we'll pull them together. And I'll ask as many as we have time for. And then I come from an organizing tradition where I cannot leave without giving you all a call to action. So we will end with that and send you all on your way for the rest of your Wednesday. But we're so glad you're here. So wanted to give you a little bit about Nonprofit Vote. So my name is Gwen Stembridge, and I'm the Associate Director of Education and Partnerships at Nonprofit Vote. Nonprofit Vote is an organization that is here to equip you as nonprofit leaders with the tools that you need to do voter engagement. We've been around for almost 20 years now doing this work. And the vision here is really about building a more inclusive democracy where there are more people who are participating in this democracy, because we know that our democracy works best when the most amount of voices are heard. So that's really what this is all about. We equip you all as nonprofit leaders. You all then equip the people that you are working with, the communities that you are in, to vote and take those actions. A couple of reminders as we go into this. As a 501c3 nonprofit, we as Nonprofit Vote, but also the majority of you all, who I assume are 501c3 nonprofits, can only engage candidates on a nonpartisan basis. We are not speaking to things that 501c4 organizations or PACs or other types of organizations can do. Today, we're really focused on what 501c3 organizations can do. And really, that is limited to that nonpartisan basis. Also, a reminder that none of the content in this webinar should be interpreted as legal advice. We do have an attorney who is a speaker, but he is not your attorney. He is not here to give you legal advice. He is here to offer guidance within his role. If you do seek that additional legal guidance or more, personalized support, we are big fans of our friends over at Boulder Advocacy and Alliance for Justice, and really recommend that you reach out. They have a line that you can call to get advice about that. Also, if you have other attorneys in your region, we recommend that you do that. So we have a wonderful set of speakers today. We'll start out just introduction wise with David Heinen, who's the Vice President for Public Policy and Advocacy at the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits. David is not a stranger to this work by any means. And has done it on the local and state and national level. So we'll start with David, then we'll move to Khalilah Worley Billy, who is a lead organizer for Greater Cleveland Congregations, has been doing this work on the local level for many years, and has some really great strategies we're excited about. And then we'll wrap up the introductions with Whitney Oxendahl, who is the Vote 411 coordinator for the League of Women Voters at the national level. And so excited to hear about her perspectives from the kind of local to state to national level. So I'm going to pass it to you, David, to start with your introduction.
Thank you, Gwen. And as Gwen said, David Heinen with the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits. We are a network of nonprofits. We serve nonprofits across the state of North Carolina. I saw at least two fellow North Carolinians on here, a friend from Greensboro and somebody from Fayetteville on the call today. We are an information resource for nonprofits in North Carolina and an advocate for the nonprofit sector. Would encourage all of you who are participating in the webinar, if you're not part of almost every state has a state nonprofit association, part of the National Council of Nonprofits Network, and would encourage you to connect with them, become a member. They'll have great resources on a lot of things for nonprofits. I've been with the center for about 18 years, practiced law before that, so I'm going to repeat a couple of things that Gwen just said, some of the disclaimers. So don't bang your head against your screen trying to read the fine print there, but that's just my reminder to repeat what Gwen said, that nothing that I practiced law for a while representing nonprofits prior to being at the center, that nothing that I say today should be construed as legal advice. We hope you have lots of questions, and if you have yes or no legal questions, Will Smith, back from his Fresh Prince days, has your answer there. It depends. Hopefully we can explain why it depends. Like with Nonprofit Vote, the center, our membership are C3 nonprofits. We really do want to emphasize that, for C3 nonprofits, if you get nothing else, that it's important to remain nonpartisan. It's legally what you need to do. It's best practices. It's really important for your reputation to not support or oppose candidates or coordinate what you're doing with political parties or candidates. So translating that into a more user-friendly way, the Napoleon Dynamite's Vote for Pedro t-shirt probably isn't something that is appropriate for a C3 nonprofit to be wearing. But, and as some Mix-a-Lot might like to say, it's a big but, it is possible for nonprofits to engage in with candidates in nonpartisan ways. So I think that there are a lot of things you can do. And my experience with the center is we've done that in a few different ways, and we'll talk about that, both some of the questions that Gwen is going to be asking us, but others is a picture from a candidate forum we did in collaboration with a bunch of nonprofits in Eastern North Carolina 3 years ago. But talking about ways that in a nonpartisan way you can engage with candidates in person in a few different ways, and also in writing and asking them questions and communicating that. So with that, I will turn it over to I think Khalilah is next, right?
Take it away, Khalilah.
Hello, I'm Khalilah Worley Billy, Senior Organizer, Interim Lead of Greater Cleveland Congregations. GCC is an organization serving Cuyahoga County, which is Northeast Ohio, and Cleveland is a big part of that. We are made up of 39 member institutions, faith and nonprofit. We focus on building power and pushing for change. And the way we do that is by using organizing tools and principles to help shape the world as it should be while dealing with the tension in the world as it is. And some of those victories that we've had using that tension is helping to win on issues such as education, healthcare, criminal justice, and also just local organizing in our communities, and understanding a big part of that is having a strong and engaged base of voters and potential voters to listen to, build relationships with, and to help create what we call a voter guide, which is an on-the-ground guide to let people know, one, what their local issues are and how they are able to target the office of the candidate to address those issues and the way that they would like for those issues to be addressed. We also have our youth organizing army that also works with the next generation of voters. And then we also focus on returning voters who we welcome back to the voting realm to deal with some of that vote hurt that they might have experienced and want to try to rekindle some joy in the voting experience. And so I'll share a little bit more about that as well. We were founded in 2011. So we're going on our 15th year next year as an organization. And we continue to do this work around thriving and striving and pushing and punching above our weight and making sure that we have a lot of people with some boxing gloves in their corner who's ready to throw a swing. And so that's me at GCC, and I'll turn it over to Whitney.
Wonderful. Hello, everyone. My name is Whitney Oxendahl, and I'm a Vote 411 coordinator at the League of Women Voters of the United States. I have been at the National League of Women Voters about 3 years working on vote411.org. But before that, I got involved locally. So I got on my local League of Women Voters board in 2020 here in Fargo, North Dakota. So I did a lot with candidate forums. We cover a lot of jurisdictions. So we usually do 10 to 15 different candidate forums each election cycle. So have a lot of that experience. And then I helped at the state league and started a How to Run for Office program. And so working with candidates, like nonpartisan candidates, training them on the paperwork needed to file. So that's with my league in North Dakota. And then 3 years ago, I applied for a job and got on the National League of Women Voters, working on vote411.org, which has a lot of voter guides. And so I am now working with even more candidates across the US from the federal offices, state, and local offices. So I really do enjoy candidates a lot. I love talking with them and interacting with them. So I'm excited about this program today. So the League of Women Voters, so I'll talk a little about the League and then Vote 411 very briefly right now in my intro. So the League of Women Voters, there are a number of you all on this call. We are a nonpartisan grassroots political organization working to empower voters and defend democracy. And we have a lot of volunteers across the country working to do this in communities. In all 50 states in DC, we have over 700 League of Women Voters groups, which I am proud to be a part of as well. We are nonpartisan. We do not support or oppose candidates or political parties. And in 2024, we did a lot of candidate work. So we had over 3,000 candidate events across the US, like debates, forums, and meet and greets. So the leagues are out there in the communities doing those forums and connecting with candidates. For vote411.org, it was launched in 2006 by the League of Women Voters Education Fund. It is your one-stop shop for voting and election information nationwide, and has information in both English and Spanish and serves millions of voters every year. I love working on this tool, especially I'm passionate about connecting people to their candidates. So we have our voter registration tool, we have state-specific voting information, and we have League volunteers across the country gathering their candidate and ballot measure information and putting it on Vote 411, inviting candidates to fill out the voter guide, and then voters can enter their address and see the candidates and races that will be on their ballots and get to know them more. And especially those local offices can be hard to find out who's running. And so this voter guide is an amazing resource for voters, and I'm proud to work on it. I will stop there. I could talk about it for a really long time because I love it so much, but I will pass it back over to Gwen.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. I'm really excited about the rich conversation that we are getting ready to have here about this. So I'm going to jump right in. The first question I have for you all, and I'm going to direct this probably to David to kick us off and then to Khalilah. So first question here is, can 501c3 nonprofits engage candidates without threatening their IRS C3 status? And why is it important for them to do so?
So I guess with the disclaimer I gave before, my answer needs to be, it depends. I shouldn't just say yes, but as long as nonprofits are, C3 nonprofits are engaging with candidates in a way that is not partisan, so is not not directly or implicitly supporting or opposing a candidate or a particular political party, it's definitely permissible to do that. Nonprofits aren't going to jeopardize their 501c3 status by doing it in the right way. But it is really important to, to think about, and whether you're doing it through a candidate forum, and I know we'll talk a little bit more about candidate forums. Whitney obviously has Whitney and Khalilah both have experience working with those, and as the center in organizing those. So through a formal candidate forum, through other ways of engaging with candidates through a candidate questionnaire, which is something that can be done. And we'll talk about, some of the pitfalls of that, and some of the real benefits of doing those as well, or by inviting candidates to come to visit the nonprofit, to see its operation, to speak with a nonprofit. As long as you're, giving an equal opportunity to all the candidates for that. And really not implying that one candidate is better than the others, or that their responses to things are better than the others. But there's definitely something that is legal and permissible to do. And I think Khalilah is going to tell us why you should do that, right?
Absolutely. And I think that it's also important for us. What we have looked at it is the office of, right? Like the office itself has responsibilities, it has roles that it has to play, it has commitments that it needs to deliver to the community. And so one of the ways we remind ourselves as our nonpartisan 501c3 status is like, we're thinking about the office of this candidate, because once they get elected, the goal is to have a relationship, not with the individual itself, but for the sake of the office that they serve. And so one of the reasons why, we think is really important is because it helps us to learn what their roles and responsibilities are. And so, yes, candidates should be engaged. We do more what we call actions, where we do a lot of listening to residents on the ground. We compile the things that we heard, and we create asks that only can be addressed by that office. And so we invite every candidate who is running for that office. Now, if they choose not to come, that is on them. Our role is to ensure, one, we have proper documentation that not only did we invite, we sent the same invitation in the same format and the same structure and the wording that actually shows that there was no differentiation in invitations, because that's important as well. How you invite. Did you do a phone call to one because you might know someone who is connected to them, or email? We make a decision early on. What's the first way we're going to communicate to them? What's the follow-up? The other thing that we ensure is that we brief candidates before we invite them to a space, so everyone knows what to expect. It doesn't mean there's not real live reactions in the moment, but it's just so everyone is on the same page accordingly, and we write it out. And so we also document that as well. So it's engaging them along the way, and not just the one night that we have our actions. And so everyone can ensure that each and every candidate is engaged, is briefed, and also we do a follow-up. Here's what the things you said you wanted to do regarding the office that you will entail, and here is what you stated. We transcribe so that we don't paraphrase. If we produce anything, we take what their words are verbatim, and we put that inside the voter guide that we have. And so the reason why I think that's important is because, as I stated in my intro, We have a 10-year commitment with GCC called Battle for Democracy. And part of it is to address that voting in many communities, most people say people are apathetic, but when we do door to door and on the ground, we don't see apathy. There are voter suppression, which is like legal things that's happening, and we hear that and we understand that, and there are policies and things that we have to address. But what we hear on the ground is voter depression. These are people who are registered to vote, who have actually voted and have not seen the results. And it's not that they don't care, because apathy means numb. These people are not numb. They have a feeling, they have a moment where they can tell you where it wasn't that they vote didn't count. They're saying my vote did not result in an action that I thought should happen in my neighborhood, in my community. And so our goal is to listen first, put that in front of the individuals running for that office. And when they take action steps, report that back to our base to see, like, yeah, this is how we're going to address that voter depression. We have to show that you can take action with it. And I think that's why it's important, because we can change narratives and languages around voters if we only listen and really begin to track where we're starting to see some of that depression take place, but also show them some wins to help begin to alleviate it. It didn't happen overnight to get here. It won't happen overnight to transform culture as well as beliefs, but we are working hard to do that. And our engagement of candidates and the offices that they serve is an important part of that.
Thank you both so much. I love what you said, Khalilah, about relationship and how relationship with the office. And I think that's something that can help us stay focused on this not being a partisan thing, right? We want to have the relationship with the office so that whoever is elected, we can then hold them accountable. And I know you have some examples and things of that to share later, but this really, it goes back to relationship, which I think is so strong and so important. The next question I have for you all, I'll direct this to Whitney and then and David as well. How does an organization host a candidate forum? I know that tends to be kind of the first thing that comes to mind when people think about candidate engagement. So I want to touch on that, but then also want to talk about some of the other options for organizations that are looking to engage candidates. How can you do so if you maybe have a limited budget or capacity? So I'm going to pass that to Whitney first.
Yeah, so I can go through just a quick step-by-step on how you start thinking about this, doing a candidate forum on behalf of your organization. So you might consider seeing if any other organizations you work with are planning a candidate forum. I might start there so that you can partner your resources and make it easier. And there ends up, depending on the size of where you're located, there can be a lot of candidate forums and candidate events. So if you already have one happening, you can see if you can partner on it, and that makes it easier for your organization to work on that. Okay, so you want to try planning out a couple months at least to decide on if you want to do it. Maybe start writing your questions for that office based on your community. And then also find a venue. It's great if it's at a nonprofit. Maybe you have a space, and you want to think about accessibility of the location as well for the public, for people who have accessibility needs. And then you want to coordinate your candidate forum. It's great to have a point person that really makes sure everything's running smoothly. You want to pick your date and time, a time that is great for a lot of people in your community. Maybe it's the evening or the weekend for people who work during the day. And then it's also great if you can stream it online, if possible, to hit even more people, or record it so you can share it out later. So then you want to get your volunteers in place. So you want greeters, a timekeeper to make sure those candidates stay on time, and a big one is your moderator. So moderators are so key to running a good candidate forum. You want someone who can remain neutral when candidates say whatever they say, so keep a neutral face. You want to make sure that they can cut candidates off, like our strong speaker. And then you might even want them to say that at the beginning and end, that the views expressed in the candidate forum are not on behalf of your representative of your organization. So you might want to have a whole script for them. Okay, and then you want to invite your candidates. And I know it was said you want to have the same invite for every candidate. That is so true. You can do a letter or you can email it out. and make sure they know their time frame. They'll be like, how long will I have to talk? How long is my intro and my closing? So make sure you set parameters, like maybe a minute for each question, maybe 2 minutes for an intro. You can set that up, your planning committee. Hopefully you'll have a few people. And you want to make sure that you invite all the candidates. So make sure you check with your filing office, your elections office, and make sure you have that full list so you can invite everyone. And then, I'm sorry if I'm going into too many details, please stop me. You want to make sure you give the candidates all equal time. So that's why it's important to have that in there. And this is more for during the candidate forum, you might want to rotate who starts speaking per question. So each one is kind of treated fairly. Your goal is to treat each candidate equally and not show bias. Okay. And then if they don't respond by the deadline, you might want to put a deadline in your invite. You might want to give them a call and check in with them. And then send them a reminder about the candidate forum beforehand because they have very busy schedules. So that's your candidate outreach. And then you are going to work on your candidate questions and make sure you have many different issues available, not just a single issue. I know your organization might work in a single round, but you'll want to make sure that your forum covers a broad range of issues. Some questions end up having long intros. You might want to keep those a little shorter and go right into your question and ask the candidate. But you can decide on this. We've just found that works locally for us to go right into the question. So voters or people watching don't get distracted by the question. Okay, so you have your forum planned. You have your candidates invited. You have your moderator, a wonderful nonpartisan human. And then you can start promoting your forum because you want to get an audience there. So you can create your online event, either on your Facebook, your website, invite partner organizations to attend and send out to their supporters, press release, email your supporters, whatever communication channels you have, you can get it out to your community so they also attend and learn more about these local candidates or state legislative candidates or whichever offices you have. Okay, and then finally, afterward, I recommend thanking the candidates. Continue building that relationship with the candidates and your volunteers and maybe the venue. Send thank you notes. They love that. So that's kind of beginning to end. I wrote out how we do our candidate forums here. Hopefully that was helpful to if you are planning to do one this year. And I will stop there. Gwen, pass it back to you.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna toss it to David to talk about some additional options as well.
Yeah, and Whitney, I think that's a terrific, kind of quick summary of how you do it and kind of step by step. So I was trying to take notes and just had a few thoughts in there to elaborate on a few things that you said. I think you hit on a lot of it. One, you obviously want to invite all the candidates. Khalilah, you mentioned that too. Is you want to send the identical invitation. And here's where it gets challenging. In my experience is that sometimes when you don't get responses from the candidates, you're like, oh, our board member is friends with this one candidate. We're going to have them reach out to them, especially to try to get them. And that's when you can get in trouble with being a little bit partisan or favoring one candidate if you're not doing the exact same outreach to them. So that's it's kind of a shortcut that can lead to potentially not doing things in a fully nonpartisan way and kind of implicitly supporting one candidate. Whitney, you made a great point about you want to have a wide variety of questions. I think that's a really good reason for organizations to partner together. I know when we did one a few years ago in Eastern North Carolina, we had, I think, 8 or 9 local nonprofits that were all partners for it, and they all had different missions. So we had organization that was serving seniors that was also the host of it because they had a really good meeting space. We had a local food bank. We had child care organization, healthcare organizations, organizations for that were working on affordable housing, environmental organizations, and they all contributed questions to it and kind of helped develop the questions on things that were part of their expertise. And by doing that, there were a lot of really good questions that were broad and they weren't all on one topic. A couple other thoughts on questions. It's really important as you're developing the questions to make sure that there's not a right or wrong answer, that there's not an answer that's going to seem like the right answer for it. And if it is, you might want to kind of step back and broaden it a little bit. One thing we like to do if we're doing a candidate questionnaire, which is a written form, rather than doing it. And as Khalilah said, when you're doing that, you want to make sure that you're publishing their unedited responses. It is to start with a kind of an open question of what their what their background is with nonprofits as a volunteer, as a donor, as a client of nonprofits, as a staff member, as a board member, to kind of connect them with that, and then ask them at the end to like say, hey, what are your 3 top priorities to answer? Because they all like to answer that. And they've got their, every candidate has their talking points of what they want to do, and they want to highlight what their priorities are. So kind of open, start opening and closing with an open-ended one, and keeping a questionnaire very short. And then as far as the kind of rules of it, and Whitney, I think you explained that really well as far as thinking out timing, switching the order of who's going first, so you're not making it seem like you're favoring one candidate based on order, but kind of doing it and hopefully randomly selecting how you choose who goes first at the opening and closing statements if you have those. But if you've got rules, and and this is why it's really important to have a good nonpartisan moderator who's confident enough and well respected enough. But you need to stick to those rules too. So if you give them 90 seconds or 2 minutes to answer each question, that they get cut off at that time, and having a good timekeeper who can give them, really clear, visible signals when they're, whatever time you agree to, and kind of sticking with those rules and giving that to them in writing beforehand. I think that's real helpful. And then finally, with questions, one thing that we've done a little bit differently than Whitney, what you talked about, is that we do sometimes provide a little bit longer question stem. So maybe have 2 or 3 sentences kind of explaining the issue. And it's a really good way to educate both the audience and the candidates about a particular issue. You have to be really careful that you're doing it in a way that's not kind of, that is factual. So, there are this many this many seniors who live in in this county or this city or this state, and there are this many people who are experiencing homelessness who live here. Whatever the number is, but to give some really basic information about things as a lead into it, both for why that matters, but also for for why the candidates and why the audience should care about the question and the answer to the question.
Thank you both so much. I think this is there are a lot of logistics that go into this, right? And I want to make sure that also you all know, as you're, especially if you're a first timer for this, I really can't recommend partnering enough. Please do, find organizations, whether it's your local league, whether if there's, another organization, a democracy organization that you can partner with. These are really great opportunities to collaborate on those things. I wonder, this is kind of to all 3 of you. I want to make sure, we're talking about candidate forums as a really key way to engage candidates, but there are other ways too, right? You could invite them to your location. I know, Khalilah, you had mentioned a candidate survey. Some folks have talked about scorecards and those things. Are there any other examples besides just a candidate forum that you want to speak to?
I'll just mention quickly on scorecards that for C3s, it's pretty tricky to do a candidate scorecard because it is really, implying that one candidate is, that you're kind of grading candidates, and that is kind of implicitly saying good or bad things. So I just want to do that. I mean, I think there are other ways other than the traditional forum, and sometimes you can't get all the candidates. They don't want to do a forum, or it's just not the right format, or maybe you've got a pre-existing event where you've got 10 minutes to invite 5 candidates to come in, and it may be that you give each of them 2 minutes just to speak at that event. So there are other ways you can do it. I mean, if you want to just be cognizant of, even if you're not doing it as a full candidate forum or a full written questionnaire, that you're still following all the good advice that Whitney and Khalilah have already given about, ensuring that everybody's treated the same.
Yes, and I can chime in. We do candidate actions, and so what that means is they get 3 to 4 questions that they get to respond to in the way they so choose. And the older organizing methods. You could do a scorecard, or you can, put how you rate them. And, as David just so, stated, we no longer do that. Right now, what we do is we give them the questions ahead of time. We allow them to respond, and we publish it verbatim without edits, and make sure that people know how they respond, and without context, prior to each of their response. And so that's the way that we do that. And then the other thing too is we engage them in the briefing. We ask them that if they get elected to office, will they meet with us within the first 90 days? And we ask that question in the briefing because we also want to know, once we ask that publicly, we make that, one of the terms of holding them accountable is that in the briefing, as well as in our actions, they made a commitment to meet with us within 90 days. Why 90 days? Because the first 3 months are really important around who they're listening to. And we also make that a commitment to the leaders that we've engaged along the way. And so one of the reasons why we feel that's important is because we don't want it to feel like campaign promises. And we also know that a candidate and elected official are two different roles. What you might get from a candidate is different than what you might see once they get elected, because in those first 90 days, there is so much happening in transitions and hirings and terminations. And so you want to be a key part of their agenda early on. And so that's another way to engage, candidates when you're thinking about the office, is no matter who wins, when is the timeline that you're going to meet with them to hold them accountable? Oftentimes people will give like a list of things they want to see change. Our role is to say, here's what we heard. Here are some thoughts we have around solutions. Will you meet with us to discuss it forward and think through how we can leverage the power of people in neighborhoods with the power of the office of the elected official to get us a win? And that way, it's a continuous process. It's not just engaging them as candidates, because once they said, we thinking about the office, it's engaging the office that the candidate is running for. And we do give them very short, brief periods of time. We want our people to talk more than the candidates. And so we give stories and testimonies. We share a roadmap on how we got there, for the questions that we ask. And so truthfully, it's important for the individual candidates to hear from people. I mean, part of this role of running for office is to support and to help support the people who put them in office. So we're not inviting them there for them to talk to us. We're inviting them there to learn with us and to work with us to help create solutions.
These are such great insights. I'm so glad to have that. I'm gonna pivot just a little bit here. We wanted to talk about some like common pitfalls. That was kind of my next question, but you all have really addressed a lot of those as we go. So if there's anything else you want to add to that, please do. But I'm gonna go to the last question I have for you all, which is, what are the unexpected benefits to a nonprofit who chooses to engage candidates, especially at the local level? We're in a local elections year. There is no off year for elections. There's just kind of local and then national and others as well. So talk to us about unexpected benefits to a nonprofit.
Sure, I can go first. I think one thing I want to say before I start answering is, especially doing all this work with candidates, is that they are humans. I've talked to candidates that have a lot going on in their lives outside of the campaign. So just make sure when you're going in to build those relationships with candidates, you realize that they might have only this amount of capacity, or they're running for office because they obviously care about something in the community. So just remember, when you go in, they're human, and it's a relationship building time, because you don't know which candidate is going to run and then get into office. So if you can go in with that mindset, it's really helpful. A few benefits of engaging is, well, number one, you're connecting candidates with your community. It gives them a platform to talk about issues that they care about, and it also educates them on community issues when you bring them into your events. and it helps them connect with voters that they might not reach. So it's great for candidates and connecting with your community. It also just builds, I know this was said before, it builds your relationship with candidates for whoever gets into office. So you'll be set up to connect with that person when they make it in office and they're working on the issues, and they'll know more about the issue and also know that you're one of the leaders in working on that. And then the last one I'd say is it just encourages voter and civic engagement in your community and amongst your supporters. So it encourages, if someone attends like a candidate forum, it encourages them to vote for that local office, because local offices, voting for those have much lower turnout. A lot of people don't know who's running for local office. So any way you can connect your community to those local offices is an amazing thing. And thank you for doing it. And it also encourages them, they know the candidates, and whoever goes into office, they can reach out to them and will feel more comfortable because they've seen them before at an event. And lastly, it could encourage other people to run for elected office. So there's a lot of great civic, like year-round work that it can do beyond just election season. So those are some of the benefits, I would say, for the candidates, your community, and for civic engagement. So I'll pass it off to whoever wants to answer next.
I'll chime in. I also think that because we look at like what's the problem, how can we make that problem an issue, and how can that specific issue be addressed by the office of that candidate. Some of the unexpected benefits, we get wins. And one of the things that we also do is if that elected official who was once a candidate acts on the things that we put forward, we also celebrate it. We invite that elected official to say, all right, here's what you said you was going to do as a candidate. We invite you back. Let us celebrate the wins. And then there's more, right? Like, because now you're in the office and you have the ability to do things. So as a candidate, you lived up to the commitments that you say you're going to do. As now the person holding the office, we want to address other issues to see if we can continue to work and partner together. And then we also ask, like, what are the other offices and roles that impacts, the things that we need to see, and we work, together. Another unexpected benefit is we continue to ask for meetings, whether that be bi-monthly, quarterly. We let the elected official choose that time frame that work best with them. And one of the other things that I do think is an unexpected benefit is what it do for your leaders who are involved in the campaign. Many of our leaders who have been involved, we have neighborhood captains who get a list of voters to call. They take part of the action. They build relationships with a voter base. You don't have to live in the neighborhood that you call, but you do have to have an affiliation with the institution that's connected to us inside of that footprint that you can refer them to, a congregation, a nonprofit. And they've been able to build relationships. We also partnered with Union of Concerned Scientists to do the data and research to see if our model works and is proven to work. And they have supported that. If you go to our website, you can see the report around why engagement and relational engagement, utilizing the efforts around democracy really are beneficial. And the other unexpected benefit that we have seen is that it's beginning to chip away at the narrative that voting doesn't matter. We have a long, 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 long way to go, but we've also brought in leaders. We've hired neighborhood captain coordinators that came out of our on the ground work. And so what it does for our organization is credential us in neighborhoods around the work we're doing, and the fact that we have done it consistently. We engage our voter base for primary and general elections. Last year, it was a busy year, and so we were doing a lot of work. And we sent our canvassers out to the ground, and people's like, "Where y'all been? We were expecting you. Do you have my voter guide yet?" And so it's an unexpected benefit because you have this theory in your mind, and your leaders have this theory, but to see it in practice and then to see not only just the current base, but also a new base of voters is really important. So the last thing I'll say is that our voter work unexpected benefit was that it tapped into young adults, ages 10 through 22. And they saw the work, they go door knocking with us. And one of the things they said was there was not a lot of joy around voting. People did it like a task and they wanted to make it joyful and experience. It's their first time doing it. And so it helped create a youth-led campaign called Voter Virginity, Make Your First Time Count. Have your laughs, make way with the way you want to. But what it was youth-led, and it engaged over 600 first-time voters. We also did a stroll and roll to the polls of first-time voters partnered with the local school district, where they took the day and made a joyful day of voting, where we had like snacks and, dancing. We did not do that while they were standing in line, because you cannot give out water or party anything. So they just voted. And then when they came back, they had a civic lesson around the change that they wanted to see, and as well as the moment and why it was important. And so that was an unexpected benefit, is that it also tapped into the next generation of voters, as well as voters who wanted to return to the voting process as well. So, because first time, you can also rekindle your first time too, despite common belief. So that is something that was an unexpected benefit as well.
I was going to add one unexpected benefit that I've seen in candidate forums we've done, and candidate questionnaires as well, but candidate forums in particular. And this is one that's kind of responding to some of the discussion in the chat and a few of the questions in the Q&A. So one thing and I feel pretty strongly that this has worked well is that we do give the candidates questions in advance. We feel like we're not trying to surprise them with things, and often if we're trying to ask them questions about things that actually matter to people in the community and people who are served by nonprofits. It may not be things that are in their talking points that they may get from their political party, from either major political party, and it may not be issues that are the kind of the hot button political topics that we hear about, but sometimes they're things that really matter to people in the community. So we do give questions to people in advance, and at a forum we did a couple of years ago, there was a state legislative candidate who seemed really nervous for when he was answering all the questions. He was reading his answers to all the questions. And he was a first-time candidate for state legislature. And he came up to me afterwards and he thanked me. And he said, I really appreciated, he said, I spent almost a full week like researching all the questions you asked and learning. He's like, I learned so much. He's like, I learned much more from preparing for this forum about what my job will actually be than if I am elected, than what I would have gotten, because I'm learning like what nonprofits who are serving my constituents, what they actually care about and what my constituents want me to be doing, and what the real issues I'm going to be dealing with, which are not the talking points that I've gotten from my political party. And so he was really appreciative. He acknowledged it. He came across as a little nervous because he said, this was all new to him. But it can be a really good learning experience. And I think somebody I think it was Andrea in the chat, who pointed out that candidates, even if they're not elected, still are likely to be big advocates in the community on these issues. And you're really educating them on things by doing it. So I think that is a real ancillary benefit of providing questions to the candidates in advance, because the ones who are taking it seriously are probably going to be doing more research on the topic and learning more, and maybe internalizing it into what they are doing if they're elected as an elected official, and understanding what matters. But even if not, as a community advocate and somebody who's engaged in the community, and getting them to volunteer with nonprofits too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. These are such great insights. And a lot of the questions that are in the chat, that are in the Q&A section, are actually, you all have answered them as we've gone along here, which is great. We're moving to our audience Q&A portion now. And I've tried my best. You all have some great questions, and thank you, David and others, for jumping in and kind of answering some of those in the Q&A. But I'm going to pull a few of those together. One of the questions that came a couple of times here is about addressing an incumbent versus a newcomer. And so how do you do that? And then I'm going to pair this with there was also a question about reaching a candidate's representative if you can't reach the candidate themselves, and kind of pros and cons to that. So want to turn that to to you all?
Yeah, and I'll start with the incumbent versus newcomer for office. And one way I like to think of this is that an incumbent who's running for re-election, think of them as almost two different people. So you kind of, and Khalilah said it really well at the beginning that we're thinking about the office, and if it's your current mayor, for example, you may have a relationship with them and with the office of mayor and with them in that job. But once they're running for office again, you're going to treat them a little bit differently. And look at them not only as mayor, and sometimes you have to kind of bifurcate the organization's relationship with them and look at current things in their relationship with them as mayor, but then also think of them as a candidate. And as a candidate, you really want to if they have somebody else who's running against them for office, you want to make sure that the things where you're treating them as a candidate, that you're communicating with both candidates, or all three candidates, or all 85 candidates, however many there are for a particular office, in the same way, and treating them equally. Whereas as an incumbent, you can still do that. But I think the closer you get to an election, the more you kind of treat them as a candidate and treat them a little bit differently. And then the day after an election, if they're reelected, you can go back to treating them as the office.
Agreed. I just can't say anything other than just agreed. Spot on.
Thank you. One of the other questions on here is, do you have strategies for candidates or parties who won't engage? And this is kind of paired with a similar question that we get a lot about talking to voters and, convincing them that this is important to show up for, who might be in that, I'm with you, Khalilah, I don't like the phrase voter apathy, because everybody's got an opinion. They've got, folks have feelings. So it's not about apathy. It's about maybe depression or lack of being engaged in and kind of met where they're at. So candidates engaging and then kind of building that trust with the community. So talking about, candidates that have not engaged or won't, and then how you kind of build that trust with the community.
One of the ways that, you do a timeline where before we share publicly when our action will be, we have either secured commitments or have a really good sense of who will attend. And one of the things that we also do when we send the invitation is we include, like, we will be engaging 5,500 residents from these particular wards who have named these particular issues. So we put that in the invitation so that they understand that this is not just about, Greater Cleveland congregations, but we be really specific around why we're even targeting this office to have this action. And I think that's really important. Now, if they've made a commitment to join us and we share that publicly, and we understand life happens. However, we let them know that our voting base is busy navigating things. And if they cannot attend, we would share that they cannot attend, but we will continue because before we shared it publicly, we got the commitment around attendance. And, that's sometimes the pitfalls because, especially with individuals who have expectations or may even have a relationship that we're treating them like a candidate. And so if you do not attend, we will let them know. Here's how we will represent that in the voter guide. We will state you were invited and committed and did not attend. And sometimes what that means is they reevaluate their attendance, or they say, we talk about who can attend instead, or if they could be a little later, do they have to stay the whole time? So we're open to having that conversation, but what we try not to do is hold an action with and share that publicly if we haven't gotten a sense of commitment. And I think that prevents us from setting a date that doesn't work for a lot of people and still having to go on. And that does happen sometimes, but for the most part, we try to not share public information around the action until we've confirmed a big portion of those who can attend.
Yeah, those little logistics end up being really important in the end. So I'm so glad you included that. Wonderful. That is about all the time that we have for questions. I know that there are a few more in there, and please do look in the Q&A section there. We've a few of us have jumped in and tried to answer some of those there. So just wanted to thank you all so much. A big round of applause to our speakers today, David and Khalilah and Whitney. So grateful to have you all and the insights that you're bringing. I think some big takeaways are about relationship and accountability, and just paying attention to some of those details around logistics. So grateful to you all. And I want to make sure we wrap up here. The other person I want to say thank you to, we didn't quite get a proper introduction for her in the beginning, but Khalilah Lynch is our state partnerships manager at Nonprofit Vote. And she has been working all kinds of in all kinds of ways in the behind stage here. So grateful to Khalilah and all that she does, not just for the webinars, but also in the community, running our field program. So want to give you all a reminder that Nonprofit Vote is also the managing partner for National Voter Registration Day. It is on September 16th this year. If you have not yet registered as a community partner, please do. You get all kinds of free swag and stickers and posters and all kinds of fun stuff. So please do. I think Khalilah will probably share that link in the chat, but please do. That's one of the action items we have for you. And the other one is to take the Nonprofit Vote Pledge. This is for organizations that are ready to take the next step, that want to do voter engagement. If you sign this pledge, we will add you to the list, and we will invite you to one of our getting started sessions that are actually led by Khalilah. And this is your opportunity to really brainstorm, okay, what would this look like for my organization? And get some more kind of small group time to have that discussion. And again, just thank you all so much for being here. We are so grateful for our partners and so grateful for the wonderful leaders here. And please do follow up if you have further questions. Know that we have a resource library. I think Khalilah also shared that in the chat. So there are all kinds of resources as well to utilize as you go into this local elections year and beyond. So thank you all so much again. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday, and we'll see you at the next webinar.